What are the differences between and among the terms approaches, techniques, methods, and strategies in teaching? How important is it to know the demarcation between and among these terms? These are what we are going to discuss today. Hello, welcome to Joyce University, and today I will be discussing the differences and the similarities between and among these terms in the teaching profession. We have the teaching approach, teaching method, teaching strategy, and teaching techniques. There are a lot of teachers and many education students who are not aware of the differences of these terms. They think that these terms are just the same, they mean the same thing, and that they are being used interchangeably. But as a teacher, I think it is very important to know the differences among those terms, so that when you are already in the field, you are dealing with your co-teachers for that matter, or you're dealing with your students for that matter, you know exactly what you are talking about. Now let's start with the approach. When we say teaching approach is a set of correlative viewpoints dealing with the nature of teaching and learning, which is translated in the classroom. So this approach is one's viewpoint about what teaching is all about. The approach is one's idea, one's perception, one's belief about what teaching is all about. Alright? And I may say that this approach would be the guiding principle as to what teaching is, how teaching and learning could be done the most effective way, what is teaching and learning, and how was it done in the classroom, right? This approach will be your guiding principle. Example, when you think, or if you believe rather, that teaching is learner-centered, then everything follows. Your activities, your strategies, and your technique would be learner-centered, meaning you are giving more opportunities for the students to speak and to discuss things among themselves, or you're giving them opportunities to learn for themselves, or to learn metacognition, alright? That is why it says there, your belief, your principle must be translated in the classroom. That's why, my dear students, take a look or evaluate your teachers. If your teachers are the ones talking in the classroom, if your teachers are the only ones, okay, who have the right to formulate roles in the classroom, then those teachers' perceptions about teaching maybe is that teaching is teacher-centered. Alright? So your approach towards teaching and learning would affect everything that would happen in your class. Alright? Now, I would like to present the teaching approaches of the K-12 curriculum. It is very important to know all those things so that teachers will have common viewpoints as regards teaching and learning process. The first approach to teaching, based on RA 10533 or the Enhanced Basic Curriculum of 2013, it says there that that the curriculum must be learner-centered. So meaning the learners are the centers of the educative process. Everything that is to be done in the classroom must be in consideration to the kind of learners you have. Because learner-centered classroom would mean the learner is the primary consideration. The teacher's learning styles are considered when you are crafting your learning plans or your lesson plans. Your students' multiple intelligences are also being considered when you are, discussing and explaining things that they have to understand, and giving activities as well that they have to accomplish. Your students' interests, feelings, and needs must also be considered when you are with them, when you are dealing with them. Alright? Because it's only through considering all those things, all students' backgrounds, interests and ideas, alright, and needs. It's only through considering all those things that you are able to ensure a learner-centered classroom. Okay? Next, The next one, curriculum must be inclusive. So meaning that teachers should make sure that no student is excluded from the circle of learning. The teacher has to make sure that everyone partakes in the learning process. Everyone has something to do in the classroom scenarios. Everyone is part of the teaching and learning process. That is why the teacher should make sure that when he teaches, okay, everyone participates and that no one is left behind. This exclusivity is actually based on the principles of education for all and principles of no child is left behind or no child left behind policy. Everyone must be part of the process. Even the most silent one, the most passive ones must be tapped by the teacher so that they could also participate in the classroom scenarios. Okay? Teaching is not only for the most active ones, not only for the most intelligent ones, but learning must also be extended to the least participative or to the most passive ones. The teachers have, strategy to deal with these passive learners. Alright, next. Curriculum must be developmentally appropriate, meaning the teaching processes, the strategies, and the techniques must be within the level of intelligence or the level of participation or the grade level of the students for that matter. Now, if you would be teaching grade 1, then you have to make sure that the activities that you give these grade 1 pupils are not too difficult for them nor too easy for them. Alright, because if the subject is too easy for this set of students, they'll get bored. Alright, but if the subject is presented in a too difficult manner for them to understand, then they will lose interest. That is why the kind of teaching that you have and activities that you provide should be within the developmental stage of the learners. Not too easy, not too difficult, just enough for them to learn, just enough for them to be engaged. Alright? Next, it must be responsive and relevant. The curriculum must be responsive to the needs of the learners, must be relevant to the actualities of lives of these learners. And it's only then that you could ensure meaningful teaching. It's only then that you could ensure meaningful teaching. So how could we make our lessons responsive and relevant? First, you have to relate the lesson to real life. You have to connect the lessons to students' daily experiences. You have to provide authentic examples, meaning examples that are experienced by the students already or that they could experience in the future. You have to raise issues, alright, that the students at that particular level are experiencing. So if your subject is math and your topic is permutation, then you have to think of examples, alright, or application of this permutation to the lives, to the present lives of the learners. Okay? Next, that is why in this particular approach, teachers should avoid mile-wide, inch-deep teaching. So pag sinabi natin mile-wide, inch-deep, is that the teacher tries to cover a lot of topics in a short period of time. Alright, so it's very wide because the teacher covers a lot of topics, but the comprehension is inch deep. So meaning it's not being understood, not comprehensible, not being digested by the learners. And the teacher should also avoid teaching to test. There are some teachers who would only teach because they have to test students' understanding later on. That's why, especially kapag malapit na yung examination, the teacher has to cover a lot of things pa kasi wala pa siyang ipapa-exam. That is not supposed to be your purpose of teaching. You teach because you want your students to develop skills that are beyond measurable through tests. Alright? You want them to learn skills that they would be needing in life. You teach beyond tests. Okay, next. Curriculum must be research-based, so the teacher should make sure that when the teacher presents lesson, he would integrate research findings, okay? Recent research findings, so that the topics would be discussed in a more interesting way, in a more convincing and persuasive way. So if the teacher gives a lot of updates about that particular topic or research findings about that particular topic, students will be more engaged, students will be wowed, students will be more convinced to listen, and they would even say, oh, this teacher really is very good because he knows everything that is happening in this particular topic, in this particular subject. That gives you more credibility to be believed by the students. And teachers should also avoid teaching the subject using the same method over and over again and again, alright? So if this is the kind of method you used 10 years ago, then you have to change them. You have to read journals about that particular topic. You have to read researches, credible researches as to how to teach that topic very well or about that particular subject. You have to know recent studies that would or changes rather in your particular area. Okay, it must be research based. Another, it must be culture sensitive. This is anchored on respect for cultural diversity. You have to remember that when you are already in the field, you would be facing 45 students, and each of these students, each of them, right, has story to tell or has culture to uphold or values to uphold. So these students are diverse in all ways. That is why you have to view learners as unique individuals. Alright? Your strategies must address this diversity. Your manner of teaching must also address this cultural diversity. And we have to make sure that in the classroom, we do not set an impression that my culture as a teacher is superior to their culture. We have to get away from ethnocentrism or xenocentrism. Okay, we shouldn't believe that our culture or the culture of this particular child is superior to the culture of this another child, or we should not undermine one's culture at the same time. Okay, so the ways of teaching our curriculum must be culture sensitive. Next, it must be constructivist. When we say constructivist, students learn by building upon their prior knowledge or upon their schema. You have to start where the students are already at. You have to dig into the students' previous knowledge about the subject. You have to build on that, okay? Your teaching must be built on your students' prior knowledge. That's why it's so important that before you start the lesson, you have to elicit prior knowledge. You have to check whether students have understanding or have a background knowledge about this subject, okay? And you have to make use of that background knowledge to build the content that you have to to teach in that particular hour. And this constructivist approach is contrary to John Locke's theory of tabula rasa. Alright? Sabi ni John Locke, walang alam ang mga bata. But constructivist approach would tell us that students have prior knowledge about everything. Okay? And as a teacher, you have to know the boundary of that previous knowledge or background knowledge. You have to know the root of that background knowledge, and you have to build on that. Learning or knowledge should be built on students' prior knowledge. And students are also given opportunities to construct knowledge or meaning based on their own experience, based on their own schema. So that's constructivist. Next, it must be MTB-MLE based or mother tongue based, multilingual education based. Because the K-12 curriculum will tell us that we have to use the mother tongue as a medium of instruction. This is basically for grade 1 to grade 3. Pupils are taught using the language that they master, using the language that they already know. Because based on researches in the Philippines and in other parts of the globe, students learn best when they are taught using the language that they already understand. Okay, that's the main point of MTB-MLE. That's why the distinct feature of MTB-MLE, and I quote, starts from where the learners are and from what they already know, proceeding from the known to the unknown. Okay, you have to use the language that they understand, and then after that you slowly introduce to them topics using the language that they are about to learn. So from known to unknown. That's MTB-MLE based. Alright? So those are the different approaches of K-12 curriculum, and I think I mentioned a while back that it's very important to know the approaches of K-12 curriculum, because we have to have a common viewpoint or a common background or idea about what teaching is all about. And because of these approaches, as presented in RA 10533, we will be guided as to how, okay, we teach our topics and how we go through the teaching and learning process. And this time I'll be discussing what method is and how different it is with that of the approach that we previously discussed. So when you say method, okay, it's a series of related and progressive acts performed by teacher and student to achieve the desired objectives or desired outcomes. So the big words here is the series of related and progressive acts. So meaning the method of teaching will be about the well-planned step-by-step procedure that is directed towards the desired learning outcomes. These are the step-by-step procedures that teachers should do so that the teachers could achieve, and the teachers and students could achieve the expected outcomes of the hour. Alright, so these are methods. Like when you are writing your lesson plan, you are planning as to the first thing to be done, the next thing to be done, and the last thing to be accomplished. That particular plan reflects the method that the teacher should do to achieve the outcome. So these is actually what method is all about. Now, if we speak of method, there are two most prominent methods that we also have to differentiate. First of which is the deductive method, and the second of which is the inductive method. Let's try to compare these two. When you say deductive method, it begins with the abstract rule, with a generalization, with a principle, and ends with specific examples and concrete details. But inductive, on the other hand, begins with the specific details and ends with the rule or the principle. Okay, so let's try to take a look at the deductive method first. From the term deductive, you have to deduce. Okay, that's why for you to deduce something, you have to start with the biggest one. We have to start with the abstract picture, the abstract picture or the principle, and then you specify things like, okay, when you would be discussing photosynthesis, okay, you are using deductive method if you present to the class what is photosynthesis or the definition of the photosynthesis, okay, and then right after presenting to the class the definition of photosynthesis, then you have to go through specificities. You have to give them the examples or the elements of photosynthesis. Okay, so that's from general to specific. Okay, but when you say inductive method, you have to induce. You have to start from very specific detail, and then you end it with the principle, with the abstract rule, with the generalization. So, like when you are, like what I said, if the topic is about photosynthesis, kapag ang gamit mo ay deductive, you have to start with specific details. Maybe you start with the byproducts of photosynthesis, oxygen, water, the like. And then you end up, and then you go with the different elements of photosynthesis. How does photosynthesis happen? And then you end up with the process of photosynthesis. Okay, so you start with the specific ones, you end it with the most general ones. In English, you make use of deductive method if you would be like okay, in English, and your topic is subject-verb agreement, you make use of deductive method if you start presenting your students about the rules, okay, the rules in SV, or the importance of the SV, and then you have to start with the abstract rule, with the generalization, and then you end it with various examples about these rules. You make use of inductive if you would present them with the example. Okay, example first, like she dances well. So if that is the example, based from the example, you have to let your students figure out the rule that follows the example. Okay, and then you ended up with the generalization. Okay, so those are the differences between deductive and inductive. Next, aside from that, you also have demonstration method, and in this demonstration method, it is teacher dominated, since the teacher shows how to operate, how to manipulate an equipment while the class observes. So like if the teacher in computer would be demonstrating how to come up with interactive PowerPoint presentation. Okay, so the teacher demonstrates first, shows first to the class how to come up with that, the process of coming up with an interactive PowerPoint presentation. Okay, that's why it's teacher dominated, because the teacher presents, demonstrates a process to the learners. The class merely observes, but at the end of the teacher's demonstration, the students are also given a task to accomplish. They will be given time to demonstrate as well, right after teacher's demonstration, to check if the students understand the concept or the students master the skill that the teacher would want them to master. So the teacher shows first, and then the students will be showing that one later on. Okay, next, you also have inquiry or the problem solving method, which is very important, especially now that we are in 21st century teaching and learning. And in this inquiry or problem solving method, these engages learners in critical thinking, analysis, and problem solving. You just let them to solve problems, okay, with minimum guidance from the teacher, and it is also expected that when you ask them to solve particular problems, you also have to give them authentic problems or scenarios that they might be facing in the future, and then you're asking them possible ways on how to address these future problems that they would have. But in the inquiry or problem solving method, it's very student-centered, because students are given opportunities to work for themselves, to study for themselves, to solve problems just for themselves. Next, you also have discovery or the investigatory method. It's also teacher facilitates discovery. Students are given just the outcome maybe, and the students are expected to go through the processes of coming up with that outcome. Okay, we also have self-pacing, where students study lessons on their own when they are ready. Self-paced learning, like what is happening now in the modular approach to teaching, where students are just given modules to answer, and students would they would decide when to answer the module and how to answer the module, and their answers would be totally based on how they understood the module presented to them. It's self-paced, all right? No teacher supervision. And in this self-pace, you are teaching students to be responsible for their own learning. And the last method is integrated method. It could either be interdisciplinary method, intradisciplinary method, or transdisciplinary method, where subjects or topics are being related or connected to other subject areas, or to real-life experiences, or to values that the students would uphold. Like if it's interdisciplinary, then a topic is connected to other disciplines, other subject, other topics in other subject. If it's intradisciplinary, then the topic is connected to other topics that are within one area, English for that matter. Speaking is connected to other macro skill like listening or speaking or writing. Or it must be transdisciplinary, where the subject or where the topic is connected to students' real life experiences, students' day-to-day experience, or students' values. or dispositions. All right, it must be integrated. I would like to repeat, when we say method, it is the step-by-step procedure, okay, to be done by teachers so that the learning outcomes would be accomplished at the end of the hour. And this time I'll be describing what a strategy is. And it says here that a strategy is a set of decisions of what learning activities to employ to achieve the learning objectives. Okay, the methods, the procedure, all right, the step-by-step process that the teacher should do for him or her to accomplish the learning outcomes. A strategy, on the other hand, is a set of decisions as regards the activities to be done so that the outcomes will be achieved. Alright? So, that is why I would like to reiterate, when you say strategy, this is the activity to be done by students in line with the outcomes that are previously prepared. The outcomes that are supposed to be achieved at the end of the period. Okay, examples of these strategies, you have think, pair, and share. In the think, pair, and share, then the students would be working as dyads, okay, as pair, and then they'll be brainstorming, they'll be exchanging information about the topic at hand, and then right after sharing, okay, right after talking with a partner, then they have to share their ideas about it in the whole group or in the big group for that matter. Another strategy would be role play. Okay, and this is very common among high school and elementary students. If the teacher would want to assess a student's understanding about a certain phenomena maybe, or about the implication of a certain phenomena, then role play is an important thing to give. We also have simulation for that matter. That's also another strategy, especially if you would want them to imitate a certain scenario presented in your topic, then you could come up with a simulation. You could also have debate. It could either be informal or formal or mock debate for that matter. If you would want your students to argue, if you would want students to evaluate the soundness of a certain argument, then debate is a very good strategy for that. We also have things called metacognitive strategies. These are strategies that students are trained to become aware of and control their learning through the metacognitive process. And these metacognitive strategies are used when the students are given opportunities to plan what strategies are used to meet a particular goal, decide what resources are needed, monitor their own progress, or evaluate their own progress. Like science experiments for that matter could be used metacognitive activities, or yung mga, when they would come up with the big projects, they would ask to come up with a certain research, they'd come up with a certain product for that matter. Metacognitive activities are very important. There are a lot of activities that you could be using in the classroom. Okay, you could also have reflective teaching strategies, and ito namang reflective teaching strategies, these are the strategies where you would be asking your students to learn from their own experience as they consider the alternative interpretations of experience, of actions, of discussions, of beliefs, when they are given opportunities to introspect and to analyze their own experience. And reflective teaching is evident when the teacher would ask students to come up with a reflective paper or with a reflection paper based on their own experience. All right. Another, you could also make use of brainstorming. It's where students are given opportunities to share whatever it is they know about a certain topic without the fear of ridicule. Okay, so in this brainstorming, the teacher would utilize the knowledge and ideas of the students, and the only job of the teacher is to capsulize all these ideas presented. And in the brainstorming at the same time, the teacher would help students to explore creative alternatives. If this is not sound, so what is the other alternative that they could have? Okay, so that's brainstorming. So those are just some of the strategies that you could use when you are teaching. These are the activities that you could do so that the students would achieve the expected outcomes. And the last one that I'll be discussing today is technique. Okay, in the previous videos we already have described the three important terms: approach, which is your viewpoint about what teaching is all about; method, which is the procedure that you have to go through, or the step-by-step process that the teacher has to go through for the outcomes to be achieved at the end of the period. And the third one is the method, which is the activity that the teacher should implement, should do in accordance or in line with the outcomes presented. And the last one is the technique. When we say technique, it is the personal art and style of the teacher in carrying out the procedures of teaching. So it's your personal art, it's your personal style in teaching. And that's why, we might be teaching the same topic, alright, but we do it differently because we have different techniques, and our techniques could not is what make us different from the other teachers, because your technique is your own manner of teaching that couldn't be copied, your own style of teaching that could not be imitated perfectly. Alright, it could be shared. These techniques are also tricks to accomplish the task of teaching. The tricks that could be shared to other teachers, but these other teachers could not perfectly copy your technique or your trick. You would always be different because you are already integrating your personal style or your own style of teaching. And no two teacher has the same style of teaching. Okay, so this is the technique. So these are the only things that I would like to be sharing to you today. Alright, and I just hope that these videos help you be enlightened as regards the differences of these confusing terminologies in the field of teaching. Bye bye, see you next time.